Hello, welcome to Biology, the scientific study of life. The evolution of populations, the smallest unit of evolution. One common misconception about evolution is that individual organisms evolve. In the Darwinian sense, during their lifetimes, it's true that natural selection acts on individuals. Each organism's combination of traits affects its survival and reproductive success compared to other individuals. But the evolutionary impact of natural selection is only apparent in the changes in a population of organisms over time. Consider, for example, the collection of shells from a population of copan tree snails, Polymeta picta. Shown in this figure, their different patterns and colors are largely the result of genetic differences among the individuals. Suppose that predators are less likely to feed on snails with a particular coloration, perhaps because these snails are better camouflaged against their surroundings. The proportion of snails of that color will tend to increase from one generation to the next. Thus, the population, not its individual members, evolve. Some traits become more common within the population, while other traits become less common. Population genetics provides a foundation for studying evolution. Today, we can define evolutionary change on its smallest scale, or microevolution, as change in the genetic makeup of a population from generation to generation. But Darwin did not define evolution in this way. In natural selection, Darwin had found a mechanism for change in species over time. However, he did not have a satisfactory explanation for how the heritable variations required for natural selection appear in a population, or how organisms transmit these variations to their offspring. Ideas about inheritance from Darwin's time could not explain how inherited variations are maintained in populations. For instance, the widely accepted blending hypothesis proposed that the traits of parents are blended in the offspring, but Darwin and others realized that over time, blending would eliminate the differences between individuals. Although breeding experiments and observations of nature refuted this reproduction, Darwin lacked an alternate model of inheritance that could support his hypothesis. Just a few years after Darwin published on the origin of species, Gregor Mendel proposed just such a model, the particulate hypothesis of inheritance, which stated that parents pass on discrete heritable units, genes that retain their identities in offspring. But Darwin never saw Mendel's paper, and its implications were not understood by the few scientists who read it at the time. Mendel's contribution to evolutionary theory was not appreciated until half a century later. The modern synthesis. Ironically, when Mendel's work was discovered and extended in the early 20th century, many geneticists thought that his laws of inheritance were at odds with Darwin's theory. Darwin considered the raw material for natural selection to be quantitative characters. Those characteristics in a population that vary along a continuum, such as fur length in mammals or the running speed of animals fleeing from predators. But Mendel and other early geneticists worked only the discrete either-or traits, such as purple or white flowers in pea plants. It was therefore not obvious that there was a genetic basis on the more subtle variations that were central to Darwin's theory. Within a few decades, however, genetics determined that quantitative characters are influenced by multiple genetic loci, and that the alleles at each of these loci follow Mendelian patterns of inheritance. These discoveries helped reconcile Darwin's and Mendel's ideas and led to the formal founding of population genetics, the study of how populations change genetically over time. By the time 20th century, population genetics also gave rise to what is called the modern synthesis, a comprehensive the theory of evolution that integrated ideas from many other fields. The first architects of modern synthesis included statistician R.A. Fisher, who demonstrated the rules by which Mendelian characters are inherited, and biologist G.B.S. Holden, who studied the rules of natural selection. Later contributors included genetics and all. Bon. And Swillwright, biogeographer Ernest Mayr, paleontologists, and and botanist Stebbins. Of course, scientific paradigms really endures without modification. The modern synthesis is still expanding or still expanding to integrate, for example, the discovery of genetic changes in populations caused by mechanisms over the natural selection. Although the modern synthesis itself continues to evolve, its focus on populations has shaped much of our current thinking about evolutionary process. Back to variation in a natural population. Notice that this variation. Back to individuals are selected, populations evolve. The pentegrass in the foreground is growing on the tailings of an abandoned mine. These plants tolerate concentrations of heavy metals that are toxic on other plants of the same species in the pasture beyond the fence. Many seeds from the pasture drift into the tailings, but only those with genes that enable them to tolerate metallic soil survive and reproduce. What's that? Bon. Okay.